History of Dark Age 3, Episode 2, Chapter 1, The Crownless Star Rises. The world had not known peace, only silence between storms. It began, as many tales did now, with a song. First sung in a salt-sick tavern, on the edge of the drowned coast, it slithered through streets and cities like smoke, crossing borders faster than swords. They called it the Crownless Star. No minstrel claimed its authorship. No bard remembered where it had been first heard. Some whispered it was carved from dreams. In the red markets of Metropolis X, the song was already banned. Those who sang it were dragged to the ruby dungeons, below House Erendor's towering spires, their tongues sewn with threads of blood silk. Yet outside the cities, beyond smog and law, it flourished. Far beyond the walls of power, in the wastes of shimmering ash, a figure rode the Manticore Morcaris, Viserion. The wind clawed at him, but found no purchase. His hair, black as pitch and sleek as oil, flowed untethered, untouched by the storm around him. His eyes, glacial and unblinking, glimmered under the moonlight's cold gleam. There was something ageless about his face, too perfect, too unmarred by dust or war. His skin, pale and smooth, shimmered faintly beneath his cloak of obsidian threadwork. On his back was Severance, the nick steel blade, humming softly like a lullaby for dying stars. By his side rode Kael Dawn and Aethoria Vehlon, silent, steadfast, their weapons bound with the same spectral alloy. The dunes parted before Morcaris' monstrous strides. The Manticore's wings were veils of shadowed smoke, rippling with every beat, and its venomous tail arched like a scythe, ready to carve mountains. Viserion's voice, soft as duskfall, broke the quiet. "They follow the song," he said, without looking back. Kael Dawn answered in a low growl, tightening his grip on his daggers. "And they'll follow it, until it becomes prophecy." Viserion's pale hand stroked Morcaris' mane. His smile was distant, untouched by warmth. "Let them." Meanwhile, in the Phoenix throne hall of Aether-Zarr, the song had already sparked unrest. Evangeline Veltharn stood upon her obsidian dais, watching the court veiled hands. "I want the name erased from every tongue before the sun rises." In the corner of the room, the ruby throne pulsed faintly, and a cold, honeyed voice whispered from nowhere. "You cannot silence stars, Thress." It was Oriana's voice, her laughter dripping like poison through the air. Elsewhere, beneath drowned waves, the sea bell of House Vehlon tolled for the first time in 800 years. Aethoria Vehlon awoke from her tired dreams, the song still humming through her mind. "The crownless star," she whispered, gazing through the depths. In the misted halls of the drowned court, her counselors gathered, already whispering, "He's real." Meanwhile, as factions moved like blades in the dark, Viserion and his Mistblade Order reached the edge of the known world, the Shattered Steppes. From beneath his veil, Viserion's eyes gleamed, watching campfires flicker in the distance, cities bracing for his myth to become something far more dangerous. A presence stirred beside him. Aethoria Vehlon spoke in a voice both reverent and cautious. "You know they'll either crown you or kill you, Viserion." Viserion's gaze remained fixed ahead, calm as the stars themselves. "I offer neither crown nor death," he said quietly. "I offer the next beginning." Chapter 2, Whispers Beneath the Thrones. The song traveled faster than messengers. By the time dawn touched the charred spires of Aether-Zarr, entire streets were humming the forbidden tune under their breath, their voices as soft as the wind through ember vines. In the high council chambers of Aether-Zarr, the flame banners fluttered in uneasy drafts. Evangeline Veltharn, the unburned Duchess, presided at the obsidian council table, surrounded by the scowling faces of her advisors, each bearing the half-scorched tattoos of the Ashguard. "It is not merely a song," intoned the Ember matron, her voice brittle with age but burning with fireborn wisdom. "It's a herald." "Of what?" growled the flame warden, his hand resting on the hilt of his scorched blade. "A man on a beast? We have seen such omens before." Evangeline's gaze drifted toward the great window beyond the council hall, where the volcanic terraces shimmered beneath the morning heat. "Not like this one," she murmured. Her son, Serathor, sat beside her, his young face calm but distant, his eyes glowing faintly as if reading something no one else could see. "He carries more than a sword," Serathor said softly. "I saw him in my dreams again last night. His shadow burned the cities, but his heart, it was empty." Silence gripped the chamber. Meanwhile, in the labyrinthine courts of House Erendor, the ruby prince Thress gathered his most trusted conspirators in the Chamber of Veins. Oriana's voice, still emanating from the ruby throne, whispered venom through the air. "You see only the surface, Thress," she cooed. "Songs are weapons sharper than steel." Thress sneered, his face pale in the crimson light. "He's a ghost, a myth stitched into melody, and yet the streets chant his name louder than my own." Oriana's laughter trickled like dripping blood. "He is what they crave, a face untouched by their wars, a promise of something untainted by us." Thress's knuckles whitened. "Then we'll offer them something worse to fear." Far from the shadows of Erendor, beneath the tides of House Vehlon, the sea bells rang on. Aethoria Vehlon stood before the whispering pool, her court draped in veils of sea silk, their eyes shining with reflected starlight from below. "The tides remember," she said quietly, tracing a hand through the waters. "The crownless star was foretold in the sighing scrolls," murmured the waveseer, bowing low. "A rider on the beast that should not bear, wielding the severing blade of Nixteel. He rides now," Aethoria whispered, her gaze darkening. "And the tides rise with him." Behind her, her son Valius, silent as always, stared into the depths where images shimmered. Viserion, upon the monstrous Manticore, his face unreadable, riding toward fate. In scattered towns, travelers, mercenaries, and scholars alike spoke his name in growing awe and dread. Viserion, the crownless star, the rider of Macaris, the severing blade. And with every whisper, more banners began to appear in secret camps, stitched with a single black star upon silver cloth. In the quiet of night, far from courts and councils, Viserion himself sat by a dying campfire, staring into the flames. His followers gathered around him, silent, watchful, their blades resting nearby. Kyle Dorn spoke first, his voice rough with unease. "Why do you let this song spread?" he asked. Viserion's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Because the song is not about me," he replied. "It's about what comes next." Chapter 3. The Quiet Crown. Night fell thick and moonless upon the shimmering wastes. The camps of the Mistblade Order were scattered, hidden amid the crags of obsidian and petrified bones, lit only by faint ghost lanterns, blue flames that could not be seen by mortal eyes unless permitted. Inside the central tent, woven from night silk and shadow reeds, Viserion sat cross-legged before a basin of mirrored water, staring into visions few would dare seek. The Manticore Morcaris lay curled nearby, watching with unsettling intelligence. Arissa Vale approached cautiously, her steps soundless despite the heavy dusk leather armor she wore. "You've been here for hours," she said, her voice low but sharp. Viserion's hands rested on his knees, unmoving. "They speak to me," he murmured, his voice distant. "Who?" she asked. His pale, elegant hand dipped into the mirrored basin, disturbing the surface, revealing flickers of shadowed thrones, burning banners, and cities collapsing beneath black stars. "The cities that will fall before me," he said, soft as a prayer. "The kings who will beg, the clans who already kneel in secret." He looked up, his icy eyes burning faintly. "They come." Later that same night, emissaries from the hidden clans arrived, those who had been watching the songs spread, seeking the man behind the myth. 3 entered the camp under the black sigils of the forgotten clans, ancient warrior tribes exiled from the Great War. Each knelt before Viserion, their heads bowed, blades sheathed but within reach. The first was Mylan Kriv of the Iron Serpents, a thin, serpent-eyed man draped in worn crimson and bronze scales. "The old gods are dead," Mylan said, voice like rusted iron. "But your name, it burns in our dreams. We saw the black star." Viserion said nothing at first, only studying them through half-lidded eyes. "You seek a king," he said eventually, his voice calm and utterly certain. Mylan's lips curled faintly. "We seek survival." Viserion rose, towering over them, his cloak falling away to reveal. The second emissary, a cloaked woman with mirrored eyes named Silra of the Pale Thorn, spoke next. "The clans of the Eastern Drift will rise," she whispered, "but they demand proof." Viserion's voice was like frost as he replied, lifting severance from its scabbard. "Their proof will be written on the bodies of my enemies." As the night deepened, the talks grew darker, negotiations veiled in promises of war and rebirth. Viserion listened more than he spoke, but his followers watched the slow shifts in his expression, the small, dangerous smile when plans aligned to his unseen will. Kale Dorn, ever the blunt blade, spoke once the emissaries departed. "They think they're binding you," he muttered. Viserion's gaze returned to the mirrored basin, where the vision still roiled. "They are," Viserion replied calmly, "but to a wheel I have already forged." Later, alone in the depths of his tent, Viserion sat in quiet contemplation. The vision swirled in his mind, not just of conquest, but of something older. The Manticore's low growl rumbled beside him, as he whispered to himself, "They see a savior, a king, a conqueror." He placed a hand upon his heart, where a faint sigil glowed, an ancient mark older than names. "But I am the wound they forgot to close." Chapter 4. The Gathering of Blades. The desert winds howled across the jagged wastes, carrying with them the scent of ash and distant storms. In the shadow of the Black Scar, a canyon split open by an ancient cataclysm. Viserion called his first true council of war. They came in secret. From the far reaches of the sunken barrens, the Iron Serpents arrived. 3 dozen hardened raiders, their bronze-scaled cloaks slithering with every step. Behind them rode the Pale Thorn Sisterhood, clad in veils of bone and dusk-rose silk, their eyes shimmering like mirrors under moonlight. But it was the Mistblade Order who arrived last, masters of shadow duels, wielding blades forged from Nyx steel, the fabled metal from the drowned ruins of Moralus. Their leader, Serathor Veltharn, knelt before Viserion in solemn reverence, laying his double-edged sword at his feet. "We recognize the Shadow's heir," Serathor said. Viserion's voice was low and smooth, but every word sliced like drawn steel. "You will not kneel forever," he said, resting his hand on Serathor's shoulder with unsettling calm. "Rise and carry my banner into the forgotten strongholds." Serathor's warriors bowed as one, their blades glowing faintly in the half-light. As the war council began, Viserion stood at the head of the obsidian table, carved directly from the canyon wall. A great black banner hung behind him, stitched with a single silver star. His words were deliberate, sparse, but they wove a spell none could break. "You call yourselves forgotten," he began, his gaze sweeping across them. "Exiles, ghosts, remnants of lost wars." Faces hardened. Some looked away. "But I remember you," Viserion continued. "I remember every oath broken by the houses that rule above us now." He paused, letting the silence tighten. "I offer not forgiveness," he said softly, leaning forward. "I offer revenge." A murmur swept through the chamber. "They will not expect you," he said, his eyes glowing with cold fire. "They think you drowned with the old rebellions. They do not know what you have become." That night, as the embers of the council fires burned low, Viserion walked among the assembled soldiers, speaking with them one by one, learning their grudges, their hungers, their secrets. Kaldorn watched from a distance, muttering under his breath. "He's not just gathering armies," he said to Orisa Vale, who stood nearby, arms crossed. "He's weaving them," Orisa replied, her eyes narrowed. Chapter 5. Murmurs in the Thrones. Whispers traveled faster than banners. In the high courts of the world, Viserion's name began to slip into council chambers like smoke, unwelcome, clinging, hard to dispel. At the crimson spire of House Arendor, the veiled hands brought the news first, their masked faces expressionless as they knelt before Thress Arendor, seated upon the ruby throne. "A warlord rises in the Black Scar," said one, a man from the Song of the Hollow Star. Thress frowned, tracing the veins of ruby that ran through his throne's armrest. "He should be a myth," Thress murmured, almost amused. From the shadows behind the throne, Oriana's voice coiled through the air like silk-wrapped daggers. "Songs are seeds," she whispered from her relic vessel, "and this one has found fertile soil." Thress stiffened. "You know of him?" Oriana's laughter was soft and cold. "I dreamt of him before his mother's womb was formed." Silence followed, save for the crackling pulse of the ruby throne. "Watch him," Thress ordered, but Oriana's voice cut in again, sweeter this time. "You cannot watch what swims below the surface, dear prince. You can only drown with it." Within the obsidian halls of Aether-Zarr, Evangeline Veltharn sat before a chamber of molten glass maps, the charred spires flickering beneath her fingertips. Serathor, now nearly 12, stood at her side, silent but attentive. "The same name appears again," murmured the Ember matron, sliding a carved obsidian tile across the war table. "Viserion. He's no merchant," the matron continued. "He has taken in the Mistblade Order, the Pale Thorns, and even the Serpent Tribes." Evangeline's eyes burned like dying coals. "A pretender," she said flatly, but Serathor's gaze lingered longer on the name than his mother's. In his chest, the flame whispered softly. He did not speak, yet, but inside, the words from his secret fire stirred. "He is the other branch, the one meant to burn beside you." Deep in the tide chambers of House Vehlon, the sea winds keened through the coral towers as Aethoria Vehlon gazed out across the endless waves. Beside her, Thalios Vehlon, her revenant son, read from a soaked scroll brought by a tide caller. "Viserion," Thalios said, his voice strange and echoing. "The name again?" Aethoria's voice was like the crashing surf. "He's no mere warlord," Thalios replied, his pale fingers tracing ancient glyphs. "The songs say he was promised to the mantle of night," he added, "a king of ashes and tide." Across the lands, fires ignite. In the forests, in the ruins, in the hidden caves, the outcast clans whispered Viserion's name in reverence and fear. They sang the song of the Hollow Star under their breath. When the star falls black and the tide turns red, he shall ride the beast the skies have fled. With sword of night and voice of flame, he shall shatter thrones and forge a name. In the depths of the Black Scar, Viserion stood in the darkness, Severance at his back, as more followers gathered. His eyes glowed faintly as the shadows stirred around him. "They begin to watch," Kaldorn said, approaching. Viserion only smiled, slow and sharp. "Let them," he murmured. He turned toward Morcaris, the manticore's wings rising against the night. "Soon," Viserion whispered, as the song echoed faintly across the winds. "They will kneel." And somewhere, in a distant citadel, a single candle flickered out. Chapter 6. The First Wound. The world would remember this night. It began under a harvest moon, bloated and red as spilled wine, hanging above the Scarlands where no bird dared fly. Viserion moved like a storm made flesh, cloaked in deep sable. Severance and his Mistblade captains flanking him, silent as executioners. Below them stretched the war camps of House Felder, vassals of House Varnix, known for their brutal war priests and berserker thralls. A fortress carved from bones and black iron crowned the nearby ridge. They think themselves unbreakable, Severance muttered, his hand resting on the hilt of his Nyxsteel blade. Viserion's voice was almost serene. Then we will show them how quickly bones shatter. He raised one gloved hand. No shout, no banners, just one simple gesture, and then the night ignited. The Mistblades moved first, striking in absolute silence, blades shimmering with moonfire poison. Their cuts were elegant, almost beautiful. A single touch could cleave through armor and flesh alike, leaving no chance for screams. Within moments the outer camps fell, fires blooming like red flowers in the night. Then came the Pale Thorn Sisterhood, weaving through the smoke, their bone-white masks glowing faintly. They struck the war priests in their temples with venom-tipped spears, dragging the thralls into choking pits of dream smoke. By the time the defenders realized an attack had come, the fortress gates were already breached. Viserion entered last, walking through the burning remains of the gate, his every step deliberate, controlled. Inside the fortress, the bonesmith himself waited, a giant clad in molten plate, wielding a great hammer forged from the heart of a dying star. "You are nothing but myth," the bonesmith snarled, swinging his weapon. Viserion stepped aside with uncanny grace. "I am the truth that myths remember." In one swift, impossible strike, Viserion's blade carved through the bonesmith's chestplate and heart, the Nyx still burning with cold radiance. As the bonesmith collapsed, the fortress fell silent. Outside, the last of the defenders either fled or knelt. Viserion stood upon the high battlements, the fires painting his face in gold and shadow. "Leave survivors," he ordered, his voice calm. "Let them carry the tale." He turned to his captains. "Tonight, we take only one thing. Iron and oath." Severance smirked. "And the world will feel the wound." Far across the lands, whispers spread. The very next dawn, across cities and wastelands alike, rumors ignited like wildfire. The Black Scar warlord had struck. An entire warhouse wiped from the maps in a single night, and his name now passed from trembling lips. Viserion. In the ashes of the fortress, Viserion watched the fires burn low. Morcaris perched above, wings stretched wide. Kael Dorn approached. "You've drawn them into the open," he said. Viserion's eyes glowed faintly in the emberlight. "Good," he said softly. "They will gather their swords. They will form their coalitions. They will offer their empty alliances." He turned toward the rising sun, voice sharp as a blade. "And I will be ready." Chapter 7. Thrones of Flame. The obsidian halls pulsed with heat as Aethoria Vehlon's council gathered under the molten chandeliers of the Ember Court. The air tasted of copper and ash. "They annihilated House Feldra in a single night," growled the Flame Warden. His scarred arms crossed over his breastplate, etched with flame runes. "Impossible," another counselor muttered. "Feldra's Warforged were fanatics, immune to fear." Serathor stood near the great window, staring out at the lava gardens below, his young face unreadable. "They weren't killed by fear," Serathor said softly, his voice threaded with something older than his years. "They were unmade by conviction." Evangeline's gaze sharpened. "Speak clearly, son." Serathor's golden eyes flickered, embers dancing within. "He's not a warlord." He turned to face the council, calm as a blade awaiting the strike. "He's a symbol." High Spire Crownhold, seat of House Arendor. Thres Arendor's chambers trembled with the gathering of the Crimson Council. The air was thick with incense and whispered curses. Viserion's armies aren't growing by conquest alone, the Masquerite reported. They're swelling because of belief. "Then we break their belief," Thres snarled. From the shadows, Oriana's laughter slipped like poisoned honey through the room. "You can't break what was planted by song," her voice whispered. "The song of the Hollow Star has returned to mortal tongues." Thres's hands clenched into fists. "We will send the Veiled Hands." Oriana's voice cooled to frost. "You'll need more than knives to kill this melody." Tidelocked Hall, seat of House Vehlon. Sea mists coiled through the coral-walled chambers as Aethoria Vehlon and her advisors stared at the blood-stained reports. The fortress burned, the Salt Rite intoned, his voice like crashing waves. "And now, every tidefolk whispers his name," the Waveseer added gravely. "They call him the Moon-Touched King." Aethoria's gaze was distant, her silver hair drifting with the sea breeze. "There's something else," she murmured. "The ancient sea bells have begun to ring in the drowned cathedrals." The room fell into fearful silence. "That hasn't happened since the dawn abyss awoke," Aethoria finished. "But they will not march together." He tapped the map 3 times upon the sigils of Veltharn, Arendor, and Vehlon. "They're too divided. Each house will seek to use me against the others." Viserion's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "And I will let them."
A new message across the realms.
By week's end, messengers carried a new declaration sealed with Viserion's black wax crest. I offer audience to those who would avoid ruin. Send your envoys to the Grove of Silent Stars. Refuse, and I shall burn your names from history. Chapter 8. The Grove of Silent Stars. The grove lay beyond the known roads, hidden deep in the hollow meridian, where ley lines bled into the roots of forgotten trees. Some called it cursed, others called it sacred. All agreed it was a place where the gods once whispered, and where their ghosts still lingered. Now, under the cold gleam of twin moons, envoys from every corner of the fractured world approached the grove. The envoys arrive. First came House Vehlon's emissary, Vela Tideborn, clad in robes woven from sea silk and storm glass beads. Her pale eyes, unblinking as she stepped from her tide barge, salt water dripping from her sleeves. The sea dreamed offers words, not swords, she announced, her voice like the hush before a wave breaks. Next arrived House Erendor's envoy, Ralos Malthus, a tall man with silver-threaded hair and robes embroidered with hex runes, flanked by two veiled hands whose mirrored masks reflected every torch as if in mockery. We come to speak, Ralos said with a thin smile, but we do not come unarmed. Then came the Ashguard of House Veltharn, 4 warriors in ember-etched armor, surrounding the young flame envoy, Manticore, a pyromancer with molten tattoos swirling along his arms. House Veltharn listens, Marin said, his gaze burning bright. But we remember the fires of betrayal. Viserion's entrance. The envoys gathered within the grove's heart, a clearing where the ground was soft with ash and petals that shimmered like glass. Viserion entered from the shadows, cloaked in deep black, Morcarus slithering through the canopy above, its amber eyes watching. He wore no crown, no armor, only a simple tunic of dark silk, his black hair loose, his blue eyes luminous in the gloom. He spoke without raising his voice, yet every syllable carried. You came seeking safety. He looked at each envoy, holding their gaze until their masks slipped. But safety has a price. The offer. Viserion extended a hand toward the center of the grove, where a silver bowl rested upon an altar of bone and obsidian. Within the bowl, ancient, glimmering coins stamped with lost sigils, each coin by the vision. Suddenly, the grove shifted. Every envoy was seized by a vision, not from Viserion's hand, but from the land itself. They saw cities drowned in crimson tides, skies torn open by black suns, statues crumbling under the weight of forgotten names, and in every vision, one figure stood untouched at the center. Viserion, crowned not in gold, but in living shadow, with the Manticore Morcaris wrapped around his throne. The choice. The vision ended as swiftly as it came. Silence fell, broken only by the distant call of some night beast. Viserion's voice was quiet but final. Choose. Closing scene, uncertain alliance. One by one, hands moved. Vela Tideborn's fingers brushed the bowl, her expression unreadable. Ralos Malthus followed, his eyes still haunted by the vision, but hungry. Manticore hesitated longest, but in the end, his fingers touched the coin. Viserion's faint smile never wavered. The first chapter closes, he said, but the next begins in fire. Chapter 9. Shadows Beneath the Banners. The envoys returned from the Grove of Silent Stars under heavy skies, but none came back unchanged. House Vehlon, the rising tide. The storm tides crashed against the coral terraces of Tidelocked Hall as Vela Tideborn arrived, draped in her sea silk mantle, her hands still stained with silver from the coin. Aethoria Vehlon awaited her atop the moonstone balcony, staring out over the roiling waters. Well? Aethoria asked, her voice distant as the waves. Vela's reply was soft, almost reverent. He is not merely a man, my lady. She extended her hand, showing the coin. He is the storm that does not break. Aethoria's gaze sharpened as she took the coin, feeling its unnatural weight. What did you promise? Vela's lips barely moved. To kneel, if it means our survival. Aethoria turned back to the sea, expression unreadable. Then we will kneel, only to rise higher. House Erendor, the Weaving Web. At Highspire Crownhold, Rallus Malthus returned under cover of midnight fog. The city streets were empty, save for the silent figures of the veiled hands watching from the rooftops. In the Ruby Throne's shadowed sanctum, Thress Erendor awaited him, Oriana's relic throne pulsing softly with crimson light. "Well?" Thress asked, his fingers steepled. Rallus presented the coin with a bow. "He offered certainty," Rallus said, voice heavy with layered meaning. Oriana's voice slithered from the shadows, filled with dark amusement. "And you believed him?" Rallus's eyes glittered behind his mask. "I believe in advantage." Thress let out a humorless chuckle. "Then we shall play his game, but only until we can twist the board." Oriana's whisper curled like smoke. "All webs tighten in the end." House Veltharn, the smoldering hearth. In Aether-Zarr, the ember court burned bright as Corin returned, his steps slow, his expression shaken. Evangeline Veltharn sat upon her throne, Serathor at her side, watching with those ancient, ember-filled eyes. Murren knelt, presenting the coin with trembling fingers. "My lady, the choice was already made." He spoke of the vision, of the weight pressing upon them all. Serathor rose, taking the coin, his small hand closing around it, with strange calm. "I saw it too," the boy said softly. Evangeline's brow furrowed. "What did you see?" Serathor's gaze drifted toward the volcanic horizon. "Fire without end," he whispered, "and I was smiling in its heart." Elsewhere, Viserion's march begins. Far from the courts and towers, in the hollow meridian, Viserion stood atop a blackstone dais, overlooking ranks of soldiers gathering in silence. Manticores prowled beside their handlers, and the Mistblade warriors knelt in disciplined lines, their swords glowing faintly with moon-forged metal, the famed stellanite, mined from the fallen stars of the ash crater wastes. Severance approached from the shadows, his own blade resting across his back. "They all took the coin," Severance said with dark satisfaction. Viserion's blue eyes gleamed. "Of course they did." He raised a single hand, and the banners of his newly sworn houses appeared, each burning faintly with eldritch fire. "This war will not be fought with steel alone," Viserion said. "It will be fought with symbols." His voice turned into a whisper that carried like thunder. "And symbols belong to me." The war song spreads across the fractured world. Taverns, temples, and markets began to echo with a single haunting melody, a song no bard remembered composing, but all seemed to know. The hollow star has risen, with night wrapped in his name. He'll build his throne from ashes and set the world aflame. Chapter 10. The Hollow Star Dream. 3 days after the envoy's return, the first alliances declared themselves, not with words, but with banners. The Pact of the Drowned in the Flame. In Aether-Zarr, under the shadow of the Phoenix Spires, Aethoria Vehlon herself arrived in person, her seabound retinue trailing mists through the volcanic streets. She met Evangeline Veltharn in the Ember Hall, surrounded by flame scribes and tattooed Ashguard. No courtiers attended this meeting, only heirs. Serathor sat upon a high-backed chair, carved from obsidian and molten bone, his strange glowing gaze fixed upon the visitors. Aethoria's sea-green eyes met Evangeline's with quiet weight. "I have no illusions about mercy," Aethoria said, "but I do believe in survival." "And you think this boy," Evangeline replied, her voice sharp as a drawn knife, "will outlive the storm?" Aethoria's gaze flicked toward Serathor. "No," she admitted, "but I believe he may tame it." Silence. Then Serathor spoke, soft, distant, but chillingly certain. "The hollow star is not an end." They both froze, watching him. "It's a beginning." Serathor's dream. That night, as storms howled over Aether-Zarr, Serathor's dream became prophecy. He wandered through a world of shattered glass skies, where cities drifted on black winds. In the dream, Viserion stood at the heart of it all, seated upon a throne of silvered bone, Morcaris coiled around his form. The hollow star burned above them, a wound in the heavens that bled rivers of starlight. Viserion's voice rang out, hollow and radiant. "You are not my enemy, Serathor. You are my reflection." Serathor awoke, drenched in sweat, the scent of sulfur thick in his lungs. Outside, the first horns of war sounded. The March of Banners. By dawn, fires bloomed along the borders of the charred spires. Viserion watches. In the hollow meridian, Viserion stood upon a high cliff, overlooking the advancing armies below. Severance approached, a smirk on his face. They come faster than we expected. Viserion's expression remained distant, unreadable. Of course they do, he murmured. He raised one gloved hand toward the sky. The hollow star pulsed faintly above them, barely visible, but growing. Viserion's voice was soft, yet filled with the weight of inevitability. Let them come. He turned, his black hair catching the light of the star. We're ready. Chapter 11. Blades beneath banners. The war marched forward, but trust was already breaking beneath the banners. The ashen tides advanced through the ash-choked valleys and drowned ravines of the hollow meridian. The armies of Aether-Zarr and Tidelocked Hall advanced together. The ash god moved like molten rivers, their flame-forged armor glowing faintly with every step. Their spears crackled with ember sigils, and their faces bore soot-black war paint, half mask, half skull. Beside them, the drowned court marched in silence, barnacle-clad warriors with pallid eyes, wrapped in armor of drift iron and kelp sinew. Their weapons were harpoons, carved from leviathan bone, humming with forgotten tides. At the vanguard, Serathor rode atop a fire-crowned drake, his young face serene, almost too calm for a boy of 9. His eyes glowed faintly with twin lights, one gold, one ember red. Next to him, Aethoria Vehlon kept pace, riding a chariot of coral and iron, pulled by tide stags. Her gaze rarely left Serathor. You seem untroubled, child, she said, voice steady. Serathor's reply was quiet but heavy. I have already seen how this ends. But not all in the army shared that certainty. Behind the marching ranks, Manticore of House Corin rode with his kin, whispering behind their pyromantic masks. He's too young, one muttered. And too dangerous, said another. Fire should be wielded, not obeyed. They spoke of old rites, of the ember eclipse, a forbidden ritual that could unbind a flame-bearer before their power fully bloomed. Their eyes flicked toward Serathor in the distance, calculating. Better ash than ruin, Mirren said coldly. Meanwhile, hidden among the drowned court, House Othmia's Leviathan cultists murmured their own dissent. The tide should not bow to the sun, hissed one. Drown him before he burns us all, whispered another. Chapter 12. Night of Salt and Ash. It began beneath a moonless sky, silent, cold, and perfect for murder. The camp of the ash and the tide. The war encampment stretched across the hollow meridian like a slumbering beast. Ashguard tents glowed dimly with emberlight sigils, casting flickers against the blackened cliffs. The drowned court's banners swayed in the salt, heavy wind, their shadowy silhouettes like drowned priests at prayer. Most warriors slept in uneasy trances, lulled by protective charms and soft hymns to their house gods. But not all rested, some until the assassins stir. From the deeper gulches and hollow caves nearby, the assassins of the Veiled Hand emerged. Their mirrored mask catching what little starlight dared break through the clouds. Their blades were dipped in hex ink, designed to cut both flesh and soul. Their target was clear, Serathor Veltharn. The assassins moved through the sleeping encampment with spectral grace, bypassing wards with hidden counter runes stitched into their garments. They left no footprints, only the faint scent of myrrh and old wine. Serathor was already awake, seated beside his fire, unmoving. He had not stirred since the evening's whispers. The fire had warned him. They come now, it crackled, voice like dry leaves burning. Let them, Serathor whispered. He did not call for guards. The first assassin reached his tent's edge, dagger poised to silence the boy before he could even scream. He stepped through the veil of flame surrounding the tent's perimeter. That was his mistake. In an instant, the ward ignited, turning the flame into a living inferno. The assassin's mirrored mask melted to his face as his body became a torch, his screams muffled by the roaring blaze. Inside the tent, Serathor stood slowly, eyes glowing. Chapter 13. The Hollow Star Awakens. The embers of betrayal had barely cooled when the war march began again. But now, The land itself conspired. March toward the hollow star. The Ashguard and Drowned Court advanced under heavy skies. The hollow meridian twisted ahead. Once a volcanic rift, now a jagged scar, filled with black fog and veins of glimmering crystal. At its heart, the hollow star, an ancient ruin shaped like a fallen star, half buried and cracked open like an egg. Legend said it was no mere ruin. It was a wound in reality itself. Serathor led the march, Drake riding, eyes alight. "I hear it," he murmured. Aethoria glanced sharply. "Hear what?" "The star beneath." The whispers grow. As they neared the ruin, the air thickened, heavy with unseen pressure. Soldiers stumbled, hearing phantom bells in their ears, tasting metal on their tongues. Ashguard warriors began to mutter under their breath, repeating old prayers they didn't remember learning. Drowned Court soldiers clutched their talismans, many collapsing into fitful trances. Even the animals, ember wolves and tide fins, growled and writhed in unseen distress. Only Serathor stood unmoved, as if lulled by the growing noise. The descent begins. Evangeline ordered a halt, her voice ironclad against fear. "We go together, shields raised, no one strays." Guided by pyromancers and tideseers, the leaders of the great houses entered the hollow star's breach. A spiraling chasm lit by flickering blue flame and pale, floating stones. The walls were carved with unrecognizable glyphs, etched not by hand, but seemingly by light itself. And deeper they went. Visions in the deep. As they descended, visions overtook them. Ashguard warriors saw themselves burning their own homes, faces twisted in grief. Drowned Court soldiers saw the sea swallowing their cities, their drowned gods laughing in glee. Aethoria staggered, gripping a wall, as she beheld a monstrous tide, eclipsing even Tidelocked Hall. Evangeline froze mid-step, her eyes wide with horror. She saw Serathor, older, cloaked in crowns of fire and bone, seated upon a mountain of ash and skulls, his face serene, the world burning beneath his feet. She shuddered violently, but Serathor walked on. Distant reverberations. Far across the continent, deep within the archives of Eridan, a hidden scroll shivered in its chains. High above, the great bells of the wind bastions began to toll on their own, for the first time in centuries. And across all realms, one name echoed, carried by ash, tide, and wind alike. Viserion. Chapter 14. The Dream-Bound Oath. The hollow star still trembled beneath their feet, but it was nothing compared to the tremors within their ranks. After the vision, they returned from the depths, pale and silent. Even the bravest soldiers dared not meet each other's eyes. They carried the dread of what they had witnessed, the vision of the black-haired prince, Viserion, seated upon the throne of silence. Back at the camp, flames burned low, and the tides withdrew unnaturally far from the shores. It was as if the world itself recoiled from what they had touched. The council splinters. Inside the war tent, Evangeline's face was carved from iron. "No more lies," she demanded, her voice sharp as obsidian glass. "We all saw the same thing. Speak." Silence thickened like smoke, until Aethoria finally spoke, her voice shaken but steady. It was a prince, Viserion. His name was clear, his image clearer. "The Song of Silence," murmured one of the Drowned Court commanders, face ashen. "I thought it was a myth, a sailor's ghost tale." "It is no myth," said Serathor quietly, drawing all eyes to him. He stood at the heart of the tent, young, but unmoved by the fear around him. "I have seen him," Serathor said, his eyes glowing faintly with ember light. "Not just now, but in my dreams. Since before we left Aether-Zarr." The room erupted. "Impossible," spat a Vehlon envoy. "Blasphemy," hissed a priest from the Ashguard. Serathor remained calm, his gaze steady as he addressed Evangeline. "He speaks to me," Serathor continued, "from beyond this world. He showed me the hollow star. He called me to it." "You speak of dreams as though they are commands," Evangeline said, her voice brittle. "And you brought us here based on that." "Dreams?" Serathor's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "Dreams are only the first step." The flames whisper too. The words chill. "The first betrayal." That night, as the camp slept, fitfully under haunted stars, quiet messages were sent under sealed banners. One to House Arendor, one to the iron bastions of House Varnix, and somewhere, far beyond, in chambers lined with drowned bones, an ancient voice began to hum the Song of Silence. Chapter 15. The Flame That Walks. The night before the storm was eerily still. The hollow meridian lay silent, the hollow star dormant once more. But in the camps above, every breath was drawn like it might be the last. Whispers of Viserion spread like plague. Within the war tent, Evangeline sat, cloaked in shadow, her hand resting on the pommel of her ceremonial blade, the embers vial. She had not slept, neither had Aethoria, who stood at the edge of the chamber, arms folded, eyes narrowed, toward Serathor, her unease now burning into suspicion. Suddenly, the tent flaps shifted. Masked figures emerged from the fog, veiled hands, assassins of House Arendor. Their blades gleamed with frost venom, their faces hidden by mirrors. They did not hesitate. Chaos erupted. The Ashguard flared into action, spears igniting with ember light. The drowned court roared their battle cries, their weapons shimmering with deep-sea runes. But these were no ordinary assassins. They wielded forgotten magic, phasing through flame and shadow alike. One reached Serathor. He did not run. He raised his palm, and fire answered. A pillar of white flame erupted from Serathor's body, purging the assassin into ash mid-strike. But the fire did not stop. It consumed the tent. It swept across the camp, sparing none who opposed it. From within the inferno, Serathor walked, untouched, his form cloaked in a corona of spectral fire. His eyes burned with impossible light, neither gold nor red, but a deep void blue touched by starlight. He turned toward Evangeline. "I am ready," he said. And then he vanished. The fires died as suddenly as they had risen. The hollow meridian lay scorched. Half the army had been vaporized. The other half fled into the waste, bearing tales of a flame that walked like a god. Aethoria stumbled out of the ashes, her face ashen, her voice a whisper of dread. "He wasn't taken," she said to Evangeline, her words Chapter 16, Ashes and Salt. Silence lingered after the firestorm, heavier than any ashfall. Where once there had been a thriving war camp, only blackened earth remained, pocked with the silhouettes of those caught in the final blaze, their shadows burned into stone. The winds of the charred spires carried whispers that tasted of iron and regret. And in the heart of the ruin, two survivors stood. Evangeline Veltharn, the unburned duchess, knelt amid the devastation, her once immaculate armor stained with soot and grief. Her gaze was locked on the distant horizon, toward where her son had vanished, consumed by a flame no mortal had ever conjured. Around her, the last of her Ashguard dragged themselves from the wreckage, silent, hollowed men and women marked by their fire rituals, now broken beyond ritual repair. "My lady," rasped Captain Calith, clutching a ruined helm. "The drowned court has pulled back to the sea cliffs. The Arendor agents fled. We are alone." "Not alone," Evangeline murmured, her voice sharp as volcanic glass. "Haunted." Her words hung in the air like smoke. A mournful horn echoed from the sea. The waves parted as the ships of House Vehlon arrived, their prows carved into shapes of mourning whales and tide serpents. Mist spilled from their decks as their warriors disembarked, pale, robed figures with coral-crowned helms and barnacled shields. At their lead stood Aethoria Vehlon, sea-dreamed lady of the deep-water coast, her gown woven from kelp silk and moon pearls. Her face was calm, but her eyes were storms. She walked to Evangeline, flanked by her tidebinders. "I warned you," Aethoria said, her voice as soft as rain on stone. "The hollow meridian is not a place for flame." "And yet," Evangeline replied, rising slowly to her full height, "it burned regardless." The two matriarchs stood alone amidst the ruin, queens of ash and tide, staring into one another's depths. Aethoria's gaze shifted toward the melted remains of the war tent. "The boy's gone," she said. "He's not gone," Evangeline whispered, her voice breaking beneath its iron mask. "He's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Aethoria asked, though her heart already knew. Evangeline's answer came not in words, but in a look. A song reignited. That night, while Evangeline stood, alone atop the ruined spires, staring into the smoke-filled heavens, she heard it, faint, but growing louder. A song, carried by the winds, from the south. The song of silence, no longer just myth, now sung openly in taverns and crypts, on ships and city streets. Black as oil, bright as glass, he rides the storm, the flame that lasts. The manticores bow, the swords all fall, when Viserion's voice commands them all. And far beyond the horizon, beneath a sky streaked with strange auroras, Viserion smiled. His time had come. Chapter 17, Banners Beneath the Black Sun. The first dawn after the firestorm was not a dawn at all, but a sullen half-light beneath an eclipsed sky. Above the scarred world, a black sun loomed, veiled by streaks of crimson clouds, as if the heavens themselves had been wounded. And beneath this omen, banners began to rise. The gathering of the shattered crests. In the drowned markets of Saffra's Maw, a forbidden port of pirates, exiles, and forgotten kings, the first banners of Viserion appeared. Woven from manticore silk, they were black as night, embroidered with threads of molten silver, depicting a crowned serpent coiled around a broken crown. At the heart of the market square, a figure stood atop a cracked obelisk, his voice a dagger slicing through the fog. Viserion rises, the herald called, draped in robes of shadow-dyed linen. The Prince of Silence will break the chains of flame and stone. No more shall we kneel to dying gods and false kings. The crowd listened, smugglers, former nobles, assassins for hire, and war orphans alike. They had lost everything in the wars of prophecy. Now they had something to believe in. Viserion's song reaches the east. In the crystal towers of the Shatterglass Dominion, far across the sea, another council listened. Here, rulers spoke not with voices, but with reflections, each seated within a prism of living quartz that projected their image into the council chamber. They called themselves the Pale Convocation, lords of fractured magics and forbidden sciences. The High Reflector's voice vibrated within the walls. This boy, Viserion, he rides a manticore, bears the steel of Varnix's ruin, and awakens forgotten songs. He is a threat beyond all prophecy. A younger reflector, eyes pale as frost, spoke with measured amusement. Or perhaps he is the prophecy. Silence followed. Already, they had dispatched envoys to seek him, some to offer alliance, others to arrange his quiet death. The Manticore's call. In a hidden canyon, known as the Hollow Vale, Viserion himself sat beneath an ironwood tree, sharpening his sword. The blade forged from the lost metal of Umberzine, mined only from the Cradle of Stars, a material thought extinct. Around him, his most loyal warriors, the Manticores, prepared their armor. Each carried a sword of Umberzine, their edges shimmering with a strange dark luster, leaving behind wounds that refused to heal. Viserion's gaze remained distant as his second-in-command approached, a woman named Mylith, once a knight of the Northern Realms, now clad in deep gray leathers etched with runes of warding. "They chant your name," she said, her voice half proud, half wary. "You're becoming their myth." Viserion smiled faintly, his sea-blue eyes glimmering beneath strands of black hair. "Let them sing," he said. "A song shapes a kingdom faster than any sword." Mylith crouched before him, her expression grim. "But songs also attract enemies." Viserion's smile deepened. "I welcome them." His manticore stirred behind him, armored hide glimmering under the eclipse. First move on the board. As dusk fell once again upon the land, envoys began to travel from every corner of the fractured world, some bearing gifts, others hidden blades. And in the Tower of Broken Crowns, within Metropolis X, a lone figure watched it all unfold through a mirror of obsidian. Oriana Arendor's whisper curled through the chamber, venom and silk entwined. "Let the boy gather his banners," she purred. "The more he gathers, the more I'll have to burn." The game had begun. Chapter 18. The Envoy's Blade. The night in the Hollow Vale was thick with shadowed mist, curling like serpents between the canyon walls. Above, the eclipse remained, an eye of black sun, staring down upon the fractured world. Viserion sat upon a low stone ledge, sharpening his sword of Umberzine with slow, deliberate strokes. The sparks that leapt from the blade glowed violet for a heartbeat before vanishing into smoke. Below him, the campfire of the Manticores flickered, their warriors resting, sharpening their own weapons, or murmuring quietly of omens and future wars. The peace was a knife's edge. Arrival of the veiled envoy. The sound of hooves echoed beyond the canyon's throat. Mylith, ever watchful, rose from her seat with hand on hilt, her silver threaded cloak billowing as she moved toward Viserion. "Rider approaches," she muttered. "Single envoy, no escort." Viserion did not glance up from his blade. "Let them come," he replied, voice calm as still water. "If they bear poison, we will drink it together." Moments later, the envoy emerged, a rider clad in silk armor, stitched with silver scales, their face hidden behind a mirror mask that shimmered like water under moonlight, the mark of House Arendor. All fires dimmed in their presence, as if the air itself recoiled. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, removing their gloves with deliberate ceremony. before stepping forward and bowing low. "Prince Viserion," the envoy intoned, their voice neither male nor female, but somewhere in between, soft, layered with a strange echo. "I bring the words of the Crimson Web." Malith's grip tightened, but Viserion, assassin in the smoke. The envoy's hand flashed, a serpent dagger of black glass drawn from their sleeve, aimed at Viserion's heart. But the Prince of Silence moved faster. With a single step, he spun to the side, his umberzine blade singing as it left its sheath. The sword's edge cleaved through the assassin's arm in one clean motion, severing flesh and silk alike. The masked figure let out a shuddered gasp, collapsing to their knees as their lifeblood, silver, not red, spilled onto the ground. Malith was at Viserion's side in an instant, sword drawn, eyes wide. "What are they?" she demanded, staring at the silver ichor. Viserion crouched beside the dying envoy, his face calm as he peeled the mask away. Beneath was a face stitched from patchwork flesh, eyes glowing faintly with unnatural light, neither fully alive nor truly dead. "A message," Viserion whispered. The envoy's mouth twitched into a final, chilling smile. "She is watching," it rasped with its last breath. "You are already within her web." Viserion rose, cleaning his blade with precise movements, and turned to his warriors. "Burn the body," he ordered, "and prepare the riders." Malith's voice was tight with restrained dread. "Where will you ride?" Viserion's eyes burned with fierce clarity. "To Aether-Zarr." A pause. "And then," he added, a shadow curling through his voice, "to Metropolis X itself." He stared into the heart of the dying fire, where silver and violet flames entwined. The game began. Chapter 18. The Signal Beneath Flames. 1. Shadows in Aether-Zarr. Night fell heavy over the obsidian terraces of Aether-Zarr. The city shimmered with ember light, its spires whispering in the volcanic winds. Yet within the deepest halls of the flame citadel, the fire burned strangely cold. Serathor Veltharn, heir of ash and phoenix flame, slept beneath a canopy of volcanic silk embroidered with sun runes and ember scriptures. His room pulsed faintly with the heartbeat of the citadel itself, an old magic breathing through stone. But the shadows moved where they should not. A figure slipped between the latticework of molten glass corridors, silent, seamless, bearing the mark of the veiled hand. The assassin's mirrored mask flickered with residual hex runes. Their blade, woven from shadow steel, seemed to absorb the light itself. No guard noticed their passing. Their target, the child of fire and dusk. Within the heir's chamber, Serathor stirred, brow damp with fever sweat, murmuring in his sleep. "Burns. It speaks." The assassin approached, dagger poised, a breath away from striking. Then it happened. The flame awoke. The dormant coals around the chamber erupted into spiraling tendrils of violet fire, forming wings, claws, and screaming faces. The assassin froze mid-strike as the very flame of Aether-Zarr took shape, howling in ancient tongues. Serathor's eyes snapped open, glowing with molten gold and abyssal black. "I see you," he whispered. Not a frightened child's voice, but something deeper, older. The flame roared. The assassin was engulfed in an instant, their body melting into soot and memory. Their final scream twisted into a curse that echoed through the city. Guards rushed in, but found only Serathor sitting calmly amidst the swirling fire. "I told it to stop," he murmured, as if it were nothing at all. 8. Chapter 19. Embers Beneath the Tide. 1. After the Fire. The scent of scorched silk and molten stone lingered in the upper chambers of Aether-Zarr. The Ashguard moved in uneasy formation through the palace, their ember spears dimmed, their flame tattoos searing painfully under their skin, a sign that ancient magic had been disturbed. In the throne atrium, Aethoria Vehlon, Duchess of Ash, sat upon the phoenix seat, her face calm but her hands gripping the molten glass armrests tightly. Before her knelt the commander of the Ashguard, armor half melted from the eruption in Serathor's chambers. "My lady," he spoke, voice hoarse, "the assassin was of the Veiled Hand." "House Arendor," Evangeline said, her voice like volcanic glass cracking. "Yes," he confirmed, "but not merely that. This assassin bore a glyph of oathless service. They acted outside even the sanctioned contracts of the High Spire courts." Evangeline's lips curled in disdain. "And my son," the commander swallowed, sweat beading despite the cool ember-lit hall. "He is untouched." Yet something unnatural occurred. The flames. They obeyed him, as if he commanded the citadel itself. The words hung heavy. Evangeline's mind spun, not in panic, but in calculation. Serathor, still a child in body, had awakened a force even she could not tame. A force that now burned beneath his skin. "Summon the Ember Matron," she commanded. "And the Red Alchemist. No more secrets. The Ashguard will double its watch, and the city gates will close." Her eyes darkened. "No one enters or leaves Aether-Zarr until I speak otherwise." The city would soon become a furnace locked from within. 2. Whispers in the Blood Spire. Far across the obsidian wastes, the whispers reached High Spire Crownhold faster than ravens. Oriana's vessel of memory, the Ruby Throne, trembled as news bled through the web of spies. Thres Erendor, the Ruby Prince, listened to the report from a trembling flesh scribe. The agent failed, erased entirely within the flames. The boy, Serathor, burned him alive. With no spell we can trace, Thres's knuckles tightened against the carved obsidian arm of his chair, but his expression remained unreadable. And the Duchess, she's locked the city down, my lord. No trade, no envoy.
3. The sea dream stirs. Meanwhile, aboard the lead vessel of House Vehlon's fleet, Aethoria Vehlon sat cross-laid within her cabin of woven kelp and mirrored pearls. Around her, the tide priests murmured in tongues as the currents grew violent beneath them. Her brother, Thalios Vehlon, tide-marked and half-spectre, entered without announcement. "You felt it," he said, his voice a mixture of surf and storm. Aethoria's pale eyes glimmered with something distant. "Yes," she whispered. The flames spoke his name, the boy of fire and dusk. She opened her palm, revealing a crystal orb filled with seawater and black silt. In its depths, a vision blade, Serathor's eyes aflame, his voice commanding the fire like an ancient king. "He has crossed the veil," Aethoria murmured. "He speaks with the forgotten flame." Valius's face darkened. "Then the old myths are stirring again." Her voice was soft, but unyielding. "We must sail, not as diplomats, but as witnesses to what is awakening. No sea can drown a fire that speaks to the bones of the world." She rose, her robes trailing like tide foam, and gave the command. "All sails to Aether-Zarr. We carry no tribute this time, only the weight of the tides." The ships began their journey through storm-wreathed seas, toward the city locked in fire. A city shuddering. In Aether-Zarr, the winds howled through the ember gardens, scattering cinders across the terraces. Serathor stood alone at his balcony, gazing out at the sealed gates of the city. He touched his palm, where a spiral of flame now curled, shaped like an ancient rune none could translate. The fire spoke again. "Soon, child of ash." His lips curled into a faint, almost knowing smile. "Let them come." The first bells of siege rang in the distance, not from invaders, but from within. The war for Serathor had begun.
Chapter 20. The Storm at the Gate. The storm hit before dawn. From the obsidian ramparts of Aether-Zarr, watchers stared into the roiling horizon. The sea boiled under a sky that bled silver and black, and through the storm came the ships of House Vehlon, their hulls carved from leviathan bone, sails spun from moon silk. But these were not merchant ships. They glided like phantoms, escorted by tide callers whose chants twisted the very waters, dragging whirlpools in their wake. In the throne hall, Evangeline Veltharn stood armored in ceremonial flame-forged mail, her crown of burning bronze hovering above her head, and at her side stood Serathor, barefoot, wrapped in simple robes, the flame still coiling lazily over his shoulders like a pet serpent. "They come," Serathor said, smiling faintly, his eyes burning brighter than the torches. Evangeline's voice was a sword drawn slow. "They will leave humbled, or drowned in glass and ash." She raised her hand. "Let them dock." The gates of Aether-Zarr opened, not in surrender, but in challenge. As Aethoria Vehlon and her brother Thalios disembarked, the city's heat struck them like a wall of smoke and honeyed sulfur. The ash guard lined the streets, silent, spears glowing with restrained flame. Behind Aethoria trailed her drowned court, warriors in coral armor, their faces masked by barnacles and kelp bales, dragging strange artifacts in chains, orbs pulsing with sea light, a heart-shaped relic beating with soft tides. The two processions met at the plaza of molten mirrors. No words were spoken, until Serathor himself walked forward, alone, barefoot upon the scorched stone. "Why do you come here, sea dream?" he asked, his voice not that of a child, but of something layered and vast. The winds hushed. Aethoria's answer was soft, but it carried like thunder through the square. "Because the sea has seen you in its dreams. And it knows what you are becoming." Serathor's flames flickered, as if amused. "Then watch closely," he whispered, and he raised his hand. The plaza erupted. Flames spiraled skyward, forming wings of ash and gold. The ground cracked open, and molten rivers surged beneath the cobbles, revealing a symbol older than the city itself, an eye of fire surrounded by coiling runes. Gasps filled the air as every warrior, every onlooker, felt their bones ignite with invisible heat. Aethoria stood unmoving, her gaze locked to his. "This city will burn," Serathor intoned, "but it will not fall." And then the sky itself cracked open. From above, meteoric embers rained, drawn by his power. Aether-Zarr became a storm of burning light. The tides surged beyond the walls, crashing through the lower levels of the city, as water and fire collided violently. Yet amid the chaos, Serathor laughed, bright and terrifying. "Let the old gods watch," he cried, arms wide to the heavens. "For this is not their world anymore." Aethoria's hand closed around her artifact. Her voice, calm amid the apocalyptic storm, spoke prophecy. "Then drown with us." She unleashed the relic, a heart of sea glass that shattered in her grip, releasing a pulse of deep, abyssal power. Suddenly, the flames froze midair. Everything stopped, suspended in an eerie, impossible stillness. Water hung in mid-collapse. Fire lingered, unmoving. Every soul caught in place. And then came the voice, not from above, nor below, but from the very walls of reality. It spoke only one word. "Awaken." The entire city screamed, not in sound, but in memory. Visions flooded every mind, a phoenix of obsidian and frost, a tower rising from a drowned sun, the name of the one who would shatter the cycle. Viserion. As the spell broke, and the fires began to fall once more, Aether-Zarr stood shaken but unbroken. Serathor, gasping from the sheer force of it all, looked to Aethoria, who now bled from her eyes, but stood, proud and defiant. This is only the beginning, she whispered, before vanishing into the mist as the drowned court withdrew, leaving behind nothing but sea salt and silence. Above the city, the sky now bore a new star, black as ink, burning cold. Everyone who saw it knew its name before they even spoke it aloud. Viserion. The song begins. Far beyond the charred spires, in taverns, crypts, and palaces alike, the old song returned. Whispered by travelers, sung by rebels, etched by madmen into walls. It had no melody, only words, haunting and inevitable. When black tides meet ember winds, the bound king stirs within the sins. By beast enthroned, on wings of flame, he rides the storm to shatter names. And thus began the season of shattered crowns.